We are slaying monsters.
Don't let the ghosts and the ghouls disturb you, darling.
When we're recording this, it will have been most of the holidays of December are over. This is the end of the year. We're transitioning into the new year. You know, this is going to be our last recording of the year altogether. So, but I understand that a lot of our listeners, some people might celebrate Christmas, some people might celebrate other holidays, some people just don't really celebrate anything at all. But I feel like we can all come together in appreciation for the singing aspect of the holidays.
Oh God, are you going to sing? Please don't.
Well, I don't know. I don't have ideas yet. I just feel like we could come together with cryptid carols.
Oh, cryptid carols.
Cryptid carols.
That's lovely.
Isn't it?
I saw Mommy kissing Bigfoot claws. Whoa.
I mean, I'm not opposed to I saw Bigfoot kissing Santa Claus.
I like that too.
I like that too. Kissing Santa Claus. I like that. The fact that you're going to make me sing first thing in the morning as well, but.
Well, yeah, I mean, Katie, you have to do a full rendition of it right now.
Surprise! But yeah, you got Mothman roasting on an open fire.
Ooh. I think that'd be really stinky.
Barbecued Mothman.
Okay.
But moths are attracted to flame, right?
That's true. So that would
works,
just be practical. Yeah, very practical.
Flies in and then just burns up.
Wow.
That's literally all I had.
Okay, well, you didn't warn me ahead of time. I came up with Bigfoot thing. Maybe Katie's got one. I don't know. Not to put Katie on the spot here, but...
No, not off the top of my head. I know. But now I'm like, I wish I had had some time. I could have come up... And Alex is really good at this. He could have come up with some good ones, I bet.
I know, yeah. Yeah, because it's all about the puns, right? You got to come up with the puns.
Matt loves a pun too. Well, if anybody's wondering what this other voice is on the recording here... we got Katie. Yeah,
we have a very special guest for this last episode of the season. This is Katie. Now, Katie, you and I have known each other for 20 years at this point.
It's true.
I think next January is actually 20 years. So,
do you have it in your calendar, Matt? Like the day I met Katie was sometime in January,
you know what's funny is that I remember I was working in a restaurant for New Year's, and it was awful because everybody who was working in the restaurant was like, "This is great," and they were drinking champagne on the job and stuff, and I was like, "I just want to go home. I don't want to be here working. I want to go to bed." But so I was working in the restaurant for December, and then I quit shortly thereafter because it was a horrible job and I didn't want to work there anymore. And Katie and I started at our next job within a week. I don't remember if you or I was first, but...
I think you were first, somewhere in there. Because I also was in a terrible job that I hated and quit in December of 2005.
Wow.
Oh, man. The escapades of your early 20s, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they were terrible. And my boyfriend at the time had gotten seriously injured and was in the hospital. And I remember I left the job one day because he was awake and I didn't know how long he was going to be awake. And they were all in a meeting. So I just left and I got in serious trouble for that. And I decided that was bullshit. And I quit.
Good for you.
Good for you.
God.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It was a combo of righteous anger and early 20s stupidity because I would still have that righteous anger, but would probably be more considerate about it now in my decision.
It's a powerful cocktail at that time, though, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Your 20s, yeah.
Oh,
for sure. Well, when we I want to say that Katie's been a friend of mine for a very long time as well, and I don't know if it wasn't for Katie, it's possible that we would not have discovered Ghost Adventures back when we did, because Katie was the one who told us to watch it.
Yes.
Many, many years ago.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You should introduce us, by the way.
I will. This is Slaying Monsters, if anybody's freaking wondering. Not that they probably are. Matt is across the table here. Maddie J.
Yo.
I'm EJ, and we got Kate. Sorry, I just said your name funny, but I needed it to rhyme. Katie, do you want to introduce yourself quickly? Or you don't have to, but you can.
Sure. I'm Katie. I don't know what else to say about this. I've known Matt and EJ for a very long time. I'm also a big fan of thinking about the paranormal, thinking about strange things that happen in our world, and philosophizing about why we're so fascinated with it. So that's me.
Awesome.
Yay.
Well, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Glad to have you. Man, I feel so official saying that. Welcome to the podcast.
I know.
I feel so excited to be here. I have to say that. I'm super thrilled. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, this is 2 months in the making because Katie and EJ and I were together at the Renaissance Fair in October and spent pretty much the whole time just talking about the podcast and talking about the paranormal and all of that good shit. And within 24 hours, EJ and I were like, we got to have Katie on the podcast.
Yeah.
And I think a week later, I reached out to you and you were like, I am so excited to do this.
I was like, immediately, yes.
Yes.
In
so
all
happy.
caps.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Welcome. So you're going to be helping us out with the Fortean Roundup for December and for the end of the year. So the final entry into our news series.
So what do you got?
What do we got? We got a lot of stuff to cover, and we'll just go ahead and start. Let's jump right in, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what was going on this month? Well, let's see. So first off, sea serpents are washing ashore in California, and some people think that they might be a harbinger of doom. Mm-hmm. So I found this article on NPR, and I just want to preface, they're not real sea serpents, but it might be the fish that sea serpents are based on, which is pretty cool. Mm. So we're talking about the oarfish here. The oarfish, it's a long kind of serpentine fish. It has a dorsal fin that runs down the entire length of its body on its back. And they can grow up to almost 30 feet long. That's 8 meters, and they can weigh hundreds of pounds. And now they're mostly deep water fish, but there have been infrequent reports of them swimming on the surface. Okay. And they feed on krill.
And I guess sometimes they could maybe lose their way and end up in brackish or fresh water at times, right? Perhaps, and maybe be the cause of some serious, some mythological creation there. I'm reading this book right now called Close to Shore by Michael Capuzzo. It's awesome, and it's about a shark, a great white shark that attacked people in the early 1900s, and it lost its way. It ended up, some current took it, and it ended up near a shore, and then it ended up in some brackish channel in interior New Jersey. Yeah, and was attacking people in a creek.
Oh boy.
In a freaking freshwater creek. Half freshwater, half saltwater.
And that was the sort of the inspiration for the movie Jaws, right?
I think so. I don't see why not. I mean,
that's what I was going to say. That sounds like great inspiration for Jaws.
Yeah, it really does. And so that's getting me thinking about this and just how, and as I'm reading it, the author keeps calling it a creature. And I was like, wow, that's like mythology. And a lot of the times people didn't know what it was. They didn't think it was a shark. They thought it was a whale. They thought it was a lot of things. So I just wonder if, if a shark can get lost, maybe an oarfish can get lost. Maybe there are instances like that in history too that contributed to the myth. That's all.
Oh, I mean, I think absolutely.
I also just think that even now we know so little about the deep ocean and the creatures that live there. I can't imagine, in the past when we didn't have as much knowledge about the creatures that were in the ocean. And they're so weird looking. They're so crazy. I mean, they're outside of our imagination even now. So I think that it's totally possible that people were seeing these creatures and they do they do come up so randomly, right? If they're being seen so rarely, they would seem mythical because you would see one every 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. It might be outside of living memory when the next person sees one. So I can see how it would easily turn into folklore.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I was looking at some of the wood carvings from old sea monster reports, particularly, EJ, do you remember us talking about Olaus Magnus when we talked about the history of sea serpents and sailing?
That rings a bell. But
Yeah. He wrote this book on just a whole bunch of mythology, and part of his mythology was sea monsters. And there's a very famous woodcut that's in the book that is a sea aurum, or a sea worm. And it's the one that, I mean, it even if you haven't seen it. It could be because every single news outlet who reports on sea monsters always uses this woodcut for it. And it looks a lot like an oarfish. It even has the fin running down the entire length of its back. So, I mean, I think the oarfish probably has a place in cryptozoology without us even realizing it. You think about these people who were sailing, they've seen sharks, they've seen whales, they've seen all of these things, and this looks completely different and probably looks more like a snake than anything else, right? Now, what's interesting is that it also has a particular place in Japanese mythology. It's a common myth that deep sea fish washing ashore prophesizes some kind of catastrophe, a lot of times earthquakes. And that was most recently illustrated in Godzilla -1. Do you remember with the dead fish floating to the surface?
Yes.
Being a harbinger of Godzilla's attack?
Yes.
EJ, did you see Godzilla -1? I'm sorry, Katie.
No.
I can't handle more people.
No. It's okay. I actually did not. I am very bad about watching any movies, but action movies are particularly low on my list. So, no.
I completely understand.
I adore Godzilla. I had to see this movie. I think it's wonderful, but I understand. But yeah, so before Godzilla comes ashore, you see these fish kind of float up to the surface, which is, part of it is real biologic. Like Godzilla is coming out of the deep sea and dragging the fish with it. But it also plays into this Japanese mythology that if you see dead fish floating on the surface, something bad is going to happen.
Yeah. That piece really interested me, I think. Because in one of the articles that we were reading about this, it was saying that actually there's not real correlation. Like scientists look into it and, when earthquakes happen and when these sightings happen, and there's no correlation. But I think that indigenous people and peoples that came before us do have knowledge about how the earth works, and because they're not dumb. And so even though they might be talking about things that aren't what we would call scientific, they are still noticing patterns about how birds move, how animals move, how the sky looks, what the weather feels like. They were just way more in tune to those kinds of things to understand weather patterns and events. And so, I understand that this may not be true, that the oarfish is actually a harbinger of doom. But I do think there's something too when we talk about folklore, this precedes, X precedes Y, probably in some instances is actually true. And that's how people were understanding the world around them, because they didn't have, radio waves or things like sonar or things like that, or satellites tracking weather patterns.
And it's kind of happening now, right? Oarfish are washing ashore on California might actually be a real warning about ocean temperatures rising because climate change is reshaping the ecology of the seas. So are they harbingers? Not literally exactly, but kind of.
They're like early warning systems that that we should listen to.
A lot of the Japanese folklore that I'm familiar with involves fish with human faces as these harbingers too. which is fascinating and super creepy.
Yeah, but if you think about it, like, if you look at like the old European reliefs and things like that, they also had that. Like any of that like medieval stuff, you ever remember that? Like you see the cats and the cats have like human faces.
Oh yeah,
it's
right.
Like so freaking weird.
It's like they didn't know how to draw animal faces or something.
Yeah. It's like they were incapable of like, it was so weird.
Well,
so it's like a thing of, I don't know, it's a thing.
I cannot hate on anyone's poor illustrations because we've talked about this before, but I just draw, I'm still no better than I was in like third grade. I draw people as like blobs with big circles as arms and hands, and that's like it.
You really do.
So, yeah.
We all have our talents.
Exactly. But I also think that maybe if you're like centering humans, that kind of makes sense, because if you look at all of Japanese anime is based on cat faces, right? That's why humans have like huge eyes and like little tiny noses and all that kind of thing. But I also think about like, I'm forgetting where I saw this. They found a new deep sea fish and it was totally wacko looking. But like its face, you could see like a ghoulish human face in it, right? Like sort of the jaw like outstretched and the like bulging eyes and that kind of thing. And so I wonder, because humans were so centered in medieval times, and that if that's what was happening, right? Like they were seeing human faces in everything rather than treating them as their own beings or something. I don't know.
That makes perfect sense. It was just a different way of looking at the world.
You're human. People are used to drawing human faces too. You're used to seeing them. You search for them in things. It's really cool. Apparently there was a human-faced fish that came ashore in Japan in 1819. Or no, it didn't come ashore. It was just off the shore in 1819 that told people about a coming pandemic.
Did it show up? Pandemic?
It did, and it let those people know about it so they could like stockpile toilet paper and sourdough starter, I guess. Yeah.
Good.
Wait, sorry, I just want to clarify. Did the fish, it like was a harbinger of the pandemic, or the fish literally spoke?
The fish
like,
hovered off the water. I mean,
and
and this is a myth, right? Like we have no evidence that this actually happened, but the myth goes that the human-faced fish was floating off the coast and spoke to the people and said, "Hey, there's a pandemic coming. You should be ready for it." Definitely
happened. File that and definitely happened.
Definitely. Anything else about our oarfish besides, I suspect they probably are some kind of mistaken sea serpent at some point. There's just so much, and we always talk about how these people were authorities, like these sailors and stuff were these real authorities, but most of the time they were just people on a ship. They might have been out there more than the average person, but it wasn't like they were extremely scholarly people who studied biology. They just were exposed to more out there. Yeah. So it's no surprise that they could mistake something like that they hardly ever saw.
Yeah, and even today with all of our modern information and access to stuff, there were still those guys that saw this sea serpent wash on shore recently. I think it was the last one that we did or the one before, where they confused a sea serpent for a whale penis.
Oh, yes. They found a whale penis that washed ashore.
Giant whale penis.
and it was like a sea serpent.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, we're going to be doing this forever. Doesn't matter how much information's out there. We're just going to be confusing things.
So speaking of rarely seen creatures, we have another one in the news this month, rarely seen aquatic creatures. This is the spade-toothed whale, which is so rare. We're talking about rare. This is so rare that only 7 have ever been seen in history. And then the 7th was found stranded on a beach in New Zealand last July. This came from the AP News. And research and dissection on this specimen has just started in December 2nd. And this is the first time that researchers can actually study this spade-toothed whale in person. Now, it was found dead, unfortunately. The cause of the death is currently unknown. The other 6 we either found in pieces or they were disposed of before we had any chance to do any research or study on them.
Is this another deep water fish, potentially?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Interesting.
I loved this discovery. I just think that, again, we know so little about the ocean. And I read an article in The Economist several years ago that we actually know literally nothing about eels.
Really?
Like, oh yeah, nope. We know where the baby eels are, which is like off the coast of England and like one other place. And that's why there's such a like black market for baby eels. They take, like, people carry them in suitcases, like, to China and things like that.
What?
Because we literally don't know where eels breed. We've never seen them breed. They refuse to breed in captivity. So we cannot get baby eels except for the very two places where the baby eels go after they're born, somewhere. We don't know where.
Oh, wow.
That is so crazy. Oh my God. This every now and then these things pop up and I'm like, I got to do a documentary on this. Yeah. I want to do a documentary on this dude who carries around suitcases of eels. What the fuck is that?
Yeah. Yep. There's like a black market trade because you can't get, because obviously in Asian countries, eating eel is a big thing. They can't get them because they don't breed in captivity. So you have to get the baby eels. That's the only way to get the eel. And
oh, man.
Maybe things have changed. I read this article in The Economist probably like 8 years ago now. So perhaps we've learned more since then, but like, I don't think so.
That is so crazy. Oh man, I love eels and sushi though, and now that makes me feel really bad about eating them.
I think one of the places might be in Japan. I forget. I know one is off the coast of England, and there's like another place where there are the baby eels. But it's totally wild.
That sounds like they sound really smart. Like if they know not to breed in captivity, like that's like, whoa. They're like, something's wrong. I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
All these people are staring at me.
Yeah.
I have performance anxiety.
Uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah. And so obviously you can also get adult eels. Like adult eels are swimming around in the ocean. Mm-hmm. It's just like we don't know. According to this article, we've never seen eels breed. We don't know how they do it.
That is so wild.
That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man.
I appreciate eels even more now. Like, I appreciated them first when I saw The Princess Bride many years ago.
Yeah.
And
That's exactly what I was thinking about, EJ.
Nice.
I doubt you'll get such an offer from the eels.
Yes.
So anyway, the spade-toothed whale. The spade-toothed whale, first named in the 1870s, was based off just the lower jaw. That's all we had. They found a lower jaw and it didn't compare to any existing whale. And so they figured that it was a new species. But up until 10 years ago, hardly anything was known about it at all. We didn't even know what it looked like beyond bones until 2012 when we actually found another specimen, which is why this one's so valuable to biologists. And this is pretty cool because the dissection and research, it's happening in New Zealand and it's being conducted in partnership with the local Maori tribe. Did I say that right? Maori?
I think so.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to pray over the whale before the operation begins and then be present for the dissection. And they are actually going to keep the teeth and the jawbone. The rest of the skeleton will go to a museum, and they're 3D printing replicas of the teeth and jawbone for the museum.
Nice.
Which is pretty cool.
It's very nice that they respect their... That's really nice respect that they have for the indigenous people in that circumstance. That's really great.
Especially for something that is so rare.
Yeah.
That they wouldn't lock them out of that is really cool.
Yeah.
I don't know that America would do the same.
That's what I'm thinking. I don't think we'd care. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is very sad.
We'd be like, but science.
Yeah, exactly.
Science first. So let's turn to some spooky news, some spooky and some sad news now. The most haunted nightclub in America is gone. It's been demolished. Bobby Mackey's Music World has officially been demolished. So I'm sure our listeners, I'm sure, are very familiar with Bobby Mackey's. It was a honky tonk nightclub. Apparently, the word nightclub is redundant. You don't need nightclub. Honky tonk is the word that is used to describe an establishment that plays honky tonk music. So it's just a honky tonk. Bobby Mackey's is a honky tonk. But Bobby Mackey's was a honky tonk and a bar in Wilder, Kentucky. And according to legends, it was also one of the most haunted places in the country. Which is funny, because, I feel like every place that is a little bit haunted calls itself the most haunted place in the country. There's never, you never go to a place and they're like, we're the 8th most haunted place in America.
No. They're always going to brag as hard as they can, for sure.
Yeah. And there's no scale, right? Like, what's the measurement of making you the most haunted?
I don't know. I don't know how many Bagginses does it take. Do you need 5 Bagginses and then you become the most haunted? Like, we need a rubric of some kind.
The Baggins scale.
The Baggins scale. The Baggins scale of haunted. Though you could...
Yes.
Like, one way is the most spirits that are there, but the other way could be, like, activity, right? Maybe you only have 2 ghosts, but they're throwing shit around or something, which is way more haunted than a residual haunt or something like that.
Right.
Right. Or, like, the battlefield idea that the battlefield would be a ton of ghosts, but they might not be doing anything.
They're just hanging out. They're like cleaning their muskets.
Yeah, Gettysburg, they're just chilling or whatever.
Yeah.
But then you have a place like Bobby Mackey's where supposedly there is a lot of activity. So
supposedly.
Well, whatever. Bobby Mackey says that it's one of the most haunted places in America. Supposedly it's built on the site of a slaughterhouse and has been a running nightclub since the 1970s. According to legend, it was haunted by the ghost of Pearl Bryan, a pregnant woman who had been found decapitated in a field nearby in 1896. Allegedly, her spirit continues to haunt the building as a headless ghost is seen searching for her missing head, which is super creepy.
It's interesting because we were just watching Portals to Hell.
Yes.
And we didn't finish the episode, but I don't think they mentioned this lady, which is a very...
No, they didn't.
That's the creepiest story. Okay, that's creepier than some. They even had some dude so there's a well in the bottom, and some guy apparently snuck over into the well and did an Ouija board and started cutting himself and putting blood all over the Ouija board, which is apparently such a powerful, terrible thing to do. It's no, this guy was just doing something.
Yeah, who knows?
But why wouldn't we talk about the decapitated lady? That's the creepiest thing ever.
I don't know, man. I mean, it's super creepy. They talked mostly about there was a Prohibition era dancer who maybe she wasn't she was after Prohibition. She was in the 40s.
Okay.
And she killed her father and herself because she was pregnant and her father had her lover arrested. Mm-hmm. And so they apparently found her diary in the basement where the guy was doing the Ouija board thing.
Okay. Maybe that's why they didn't mention the headless lady, because there was no creepiness to it. When they're looking for a portal to hell, right? There's no demon involved in someone being brutally murdered. It's just they were brutally murdered. I mean, they do like to do that angle of, a demon is driving people to do cruel things here. Or
they love to do that.
Right.
They love to do that one.
Yeah.
But I wonder if it's just it was too straightforward. Though honestly, for me, when I heard the headless woman, you said that is there historical proof that she was actually murdered there, or it's just a legend?
Yeah.
It's
no,
just a legend?
that's legitimate. Yeah, she was actually
it's
murdered
legit.
there.
Okay. So never mind. I was going to say
it's
really
a legit
sounds
murder that happened.
Yeah, I was going to say it sounds very Headless Horseman put somewhere else, but if she actually was, then that's very different.
Yeah, no, it's a real story. It apparently rocked that community pretty hard, which is, I mean, understandably, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you said we were watching Portals to Hell just to catch up on some of the history of Bobby Mackey's. Supposedly there is a portal to hell in the basement because there are water stains on the wall that look like human faces down there too.
Well, obviously.
Yeah. It's funny because the portals to hell that we watched, they didn't get much activity at all.
No, they didn't.
Like, despite all of that, despite the the dancer and the guy doing the Ouija board session in the basement and stuff, really nothing happened. They even commented on it. Nothing happened. And then they brought in Cindy Kaza, who's a medium, my favorite medium, who all of a sudden all the activity started because she showed up and was like, oh yeah, and there's a woman searching for her dead baby and blah blah blah, and like all this stuff, and just started rambling whatever she felt, and then everything started.
Yeah.
If she's your favorite medium,
Yeah.
who's your favorite large?
Ha.
I had to do it, sorry.
Yeah, I love it. I wanted to comment on the faces on the wall. I didn't remember this part because I haven't watched Portals to Hell recently or the Ghost Adventures episodes on Bobby Mackey's, but I feel like seeing faces in things or seeing images in otherwise like nondescript objects is such an interesting piece of ghost hunting and like anecdotal evidence that they collect, because truly, like, what is more subjective than that? It's like an ink blot test or something. Like, you might see one thing and I might see something entirely different, and yet they're using it as like the basis of declaring that there's a portal to hell in the basement of this bar. I always just find those particularly amusing. Like, I'm here for it because I'm here for the potential of the reality and also the fiction that they're weaving for me. So yeah, I always find this interesting. Mm-hmm.
That is interesting. It's like they built shakiness upon shakiness, and there's like very little like support with the portal to hell, and then there's very little support for the pareidolia that you have going on with the water stains. So
well, and I mean, as soon as you call the show Portals to Hell, you got to find portals to hell, right?
Everything.
And if you're gonna find portals to hell, you got to figure out some type of thing that indicates a portal to hell, because it's not going to be like, oh, that door, is, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, yeah. You need the faces.
You need the faces.
Mean portals to hell.
I feel like Portals to Hell does the same thing that all of those shows do, which we've talked about before, the three of us together, which is that they start out being willing to not find a portal to hell. Like, some of the early episodes, they're like, no, there might be activity here, but there's no portal to hell. And then by the end of the show, even by the end of the first season, I think there has to be one in every episode. And just following that trajectory is interesting.
I understand it, though, because I'm sure you have a team of producers that are like, wait, you can't just find nothing here. Like, you got to find something. Unfortunately, skepticism and critical thinking tend not to be like the sexy version of ghost hunting. So they're going to always want you to find very hard, concrete evidence of whatever the spirit or the demon or the portal or whatever. So,
well, the really wonderful thing is that in the show Portals to Hell, there was a scene where they were talking to a bishop, and the bishop said, literally anything can be a portal. He said,
okay. He's like, this coffee cup could be a portal.
This coffee cup could be a portal because you could draw a spirit or a demon to it and welcome the demon to come through it, and therefore it is now a portal. So, luckily for those two people, for Katrina and Jack, the host of the show, they're not going to have a dearth of portals. It's going to be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always more portals.
It's going to be good.
Starbucks is full of portals, apparently.
So, yeah. Haunted Starbucks, a new show sponsored by Starbucks, brought to you by Starbucks.
Exactly, right. Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm such a basic bitch for portals in October. Get my portal latte.
I always liked, but getting back to Bobby Mackey's, right?
Yes.
It's a favorite location of Ghost Adventures, and it's one of the few spots that Zach will actually travel to go investigate, because Zach doesn't really leave the West Coast anymore. But this current building, they demolished it because basically it is it's everything's outdated. You know, it's it got outdated wiring, outdated plumbing. The building itself is like 90 years old, and it's been more or less continually running that whole time. So it's not really surprising that you're getting that kind of phenomena there.
Yeah, of course you're going to see things like shifting, and I think there's like a road that runs right by it.
Well, yeah. So there's a road. They're near train tracks. Bobby Mackey had tried to do an expansion earlier, and during the course of the expansion, they had a crack form in the parking lot that then ran to the building, and like there was some crack that formed in the building as well. So they believe that they're on a fault line. Like, you know, that's going to cause things to come flying off shelves, honestly. Like, it's going to cause things to move around. I know, Katie, you were telling us about an instance in the British Museum offline,
Oh,
right?
yeah. I either read or saw, but it was specifically about like debunking ghost myths, paranormal myths. And there was this object at the British Museum that was sort of very famous as a haunted object because it would rotate in its case. So, you know, museum curators would like put it back facing forward the way it was supposed to be, and then it would turn. And people were really confused about it, and some scientists came in and were looking at it, and it turns out the bottom of the object was very slightly like convex. And also the British Museum, most people probably know, but if you don't, it's right next to a huge road. Lots of traffic goes by it, and what they discovered was that the traffic from the road, the trucks, the buses, all the cars were causing the object to vibrate ever so slightly. And then because the bottom of it was convex, it would slowly turn around in a little circle in its case. And so I just find that fascinating because the British Museum is a huge hawking building. You wouldn't think its walls are very thick, all this kind of thing. So you wouldn't think that buses driving by are shaking shelves in the museum that much. And obviously the museum's probably trying to prevent that, right? Because they have priceless artifacts in there that they don't want damaged. But no, it still is. There are like minuscule vibrations that are happening that were causing this object to turn because it wasn't exactly level. And I just think that is really proof that a lot of these things, these objects you see falling off shelves or moving or shifting, can really be doing it because the human mind or the human body can't perceive things that are just like legitimately affecting those objects. And I mean, like you could have a set of glasses that were put back on the shelf correctly, and then like they slowly are inching towards the edge and they look fine until they're not, and they all come like tumbling off. And
then you say, oh,
it's fascinating.
The glass came flying at my head, right? Even though it didn't, it just fell off the shelf. But you say, yeah, yesterday I put that up there, it was very secure, it was far from the edge. You don't realize that over the course of a day, as trucks have been rumbling by, the glass has shifted.
Train tracks create a lot of vibrations. And also, you don't have to know that you put the glasses back there securely. You could have been standing there working, and 2 minutes ago you looked at those glasses and they're sitting securely on the shelf. And if you imagine that it's like the glass in the back that's forcing all the glasses off, that would look really volatile,
right? Right, yeah, if it's the back one and not the front one, but the back one is enough to push everything behind it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's a good point. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we are talking about a building that is pretty much condemnable. And I mean, that was a British Museum. Of course things are going to go flying. It makes sense.
Yeah, not the British Museum wasn't condemnable.
No.
Bobby Mackey's was condemnable. Yeah, okay.
Yes, so, yeah.
Yeah, the British Museum was not condemnable, and these things still happen there.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, it's crazy.
They happen in museums are probably one of, other than, I don't know, scientific labs with sensitive instrumentation, museums are probably one of the areas that are most closely monitored for their interior conditions of any buildings that we have, right? And it was still happening there. So
what does that tell you?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. As opposed to this honky tonk where they were having live performances all the time and people were, I don't know.
That's true.
What's a honky tonk dance?
I don't know. Were they line dancing? Were they boot scooting?
I don't know what a boot scoot is.
Were they boogieing? I don't know. But I'm sure there were a lot of elbows and knees involved.
A good old jamboree.
Yeah.
Katie, you're from the South. What dancing do you do down there? Yeehaw.
I mean, I don't do those kinds of dances, but I think, you got to get down to like your Tennessee or your Kentucky, where Bobby Mackey says, get into those bar dances.
Yeah. So Bobby Mackey, he's wants to build a new location on the site. I guess probably a new music venue / haunted venue. I assume it's going to also be, part of the haunted venue will be in it because he claims that he's saved the wall of faces from the basement portal to hell. And I assume they will get incorporated into the new venue some way.
I mean, good on him.
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm really happy it's going to continue because I want to visit it.
Yeah, I want to too. Even though Bobby Mackey himself says he's never experienced anything there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did say that.
You told me that.
And Katie, you said that because you heard him say that on Ghost Adventures, right?
I'm pretty sure he said it in one of the episodes of Ghost Adventures. Maybe the first one. They probably didn't ask him again after that because, not good for...
Why would you, right?
Exactly.
Katie, did you ever see the Dybbuk Box episode of Ghost Adventures?
No.
Oh, man.
The Dybbuk Box?
This is a very, very quick side tangent, but the Dybbuk Box, they brought in a rabbi because it's this like Jewish wine box that's supposedly haunted. They brought in a rabbi because they thought the rabbi would be like, oh yeah, Dybbuks are these things, they haunt these areas, blah, blah, blah. And the rabbi that came in was like, yeah, I don't think you have to worry about it. Dybbuks don't really do that. On air. And they were like, are you sure?
And he said, I don't think I'm saying what you want me to say here, or something
he said something along the lines of like, I don't know if that's good for your program, but that's how it is.
And Zach, you could see like the life force drain out of Zach. And he was like, oh my God. Because
so good.
I really don't think Zach makes people say things. I think that he tries to be as honest as you can be when you're in this business. I think he's, and so I think that his integrity is important to him. And when the rabbi even mentioned that there could be anything that maybe is not full of integrity on Zach's end, I think he was just mortified. And now he has all this work to do to build back up into being like, and then he did like a follow-up episode where he was like, with the rabbi, and he was like, I did not coerce the rabbi into saying anything.
I was not coached, blah, blah, blah.
And the rabbi had to...
God.
It was really funny.
That's so funny. Yeah. I mean, the thing that he does is that he latches on to most people that he's speaking to legitimately do feel that they've had paranormal experiences, I think. So I agree with you. I don't think he's reaching all the time, but sometimes he will take what people say and push it. So, he'll be speaking with a historian and they'll be like, I mean, sure, possibly.
Yeah. Definitely.
It's clear that person doesn't think so, but they're willing to entertain that there's something they don't know that could be going on. And Zach will be like, so you're saying there's ghosts? And he
Yeah, but you're right. They all do that too. They're all like, is it possible that those spirits are still here? And they're like, I mean, I guess so. And they're like, so it is haunted.
Exactly.
You have it on authority.
The authority of this historian who actually did not say that.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Are we going to go to drones?
I think so.
Drones? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yay, drones!
Yeah, so this is kind of our feature story. This is the feature story for a lot of people right now and this is still ongoing, but drones have been sighted all over New Jersey to the point that just recently the FAA has actually temporarily banned them in the state. This comes after weeks of multiple eyewitness reports and videos from civilians. People have seen orbs, they've seen winged objects, and they've even seen like amorphous objects which appear to change their appearance in the sky. Now, this had all started in early December, coinciding with a prediction that aliens would invade. And I don't even know if people remember this because this got overshadowed by all the drone news, but there was this guy named Cliff High who's a computer scientist and wrote a very advanced algorithm that generates predictions by tracking internet keywords on blogs and forums like Reddit, X, whatever. And the model concluded that, this is real, the model concluded that if Donald Trump appeared on the Joe Rogan show, about a month after that, aliens would be seen engaging in dogfights with fighter jets.
I feel like that's the piece that makes me not buy this prediction, right? Because if you'd based it off of something like the election, something that had a fixed point prior to the prediction being made, then perhaps, but I don't know, an interview on a podcast, I mean, the time of that is probably real flexible. It probably, you don't even know when it's going to happen until it happens because presidential campaigns are all over the place. The scheduling fluctuates minute to minute sometimes. So that's what makes this one hard for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. Me too. And I think that it's like you couldn't have picked the two dumbest people to also like be these
the
predictors.
Emissaries, right?
Yeah, like the harbingers of of what would be an incredibly awe-inspiring moment in our human history. You have these two ding-dongs sitting down together to talk about like golf and like whatever the fuck these guys talk about. Yeah.
Well, and also I think it's important to point out that the program's called WebBot, right? Very unoriginal name, WebBot. But they like to talk about, and High especially, Cliff High likes to talk about how it accurately predicted the 2003 Northeast blackout, the 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake, and Hurricane Katrina, which is impressive, sure. But he also had it, like it predicted that the Earth's magnetic poles would shift in 2012, leading to nuclear destruction. And in 2008, an earthquake would devastate Vancouver, and World War III would break out in the Middle East during 2011. Also, as far as I know, it didn't predict the COVID pandemic, which is a pretty big one to just miss, you know? So I think it's very telling that the successful predictions are the ones that hit the news outlets and the ones that he talks about, not the failed ones.
Yeah.
That's just classic cherry picking after the fact, which is what most psychics do.
I think the octopus that predicts World Cup winners is actually more accurate.
It's entirely possible.
You know, octopi are extremely intelligent.
Yes.
So probably more intelligent than WebBot in my
probably more intelligent than
estimation.
many people that are in charge of a lot of important things in our country.
Because what is WebBot doing anyway? It's just tracking trends, right? Like it's tracking trends. It's not actually doing anything that is it's predictive, but it's not really predictive because it's predictive based on previous input, right? So it's kind of like
it's like AI, basically.
Yeah, it's AI. It is AI, but it can only go so far. Like it's not actually evidence based on anything.
Right. And I mean, something that I find really annoying about generative AI and people praising its greatness is that, you know, like 90% of what's on the internet is total trash and nonsense. And everybody knows that. So, like, I don't understand why people think that bots or AI trained on the trash that is the internet are going to, like, correctly do anything. I mean, maybe sometimes, but, you know.
Well, and
they're going to have to know to sort through the trash.
I think we've talked about this before, but the dead internet theory is essentially that most of the internet is just bots. Like the majority of it is just bots communicating with each other, and that is what is creating a lot of the content on the internet. So there's no intelligence coming out of this. It's just responsiveness and AI talking to AI. But that's only going to get you so far because, garbage in, garbage out, right? What is that AI developed on? But anyway, a lot of people took...
Drone war.
Drone war, right? I mean, it's kind of what it is.
Now we have a drone war.
And then people took this prediction of an impending alien invasion, and around December 3rd, something arrived in the New Jersey skies, and that's lots and lots and lots of drones. There were also drones that were sighted in Lakenheath in Suffolk, England at the end of November, although most of those reports have just been eclipsed by the New Jersey ones at this point. It's interesting because a lot of the drones that they're seeing in New Jersey have FAA regulated lights on their wings. They have the red and the green and then the red up top. That indicates that they're not alien crafts, but regular old run-of-the-mill drones. So I doubt that it's the alien invasion unless the aliens are showing up with FAA regulated lights on their spacecrafts.
That's super fascinating that it has the FAA lights.
Yeah.
Another piece I found interesting in some of the articles we read about this was, curious, because they said a lot of these are larger drones, and larger drones need more conspicuous landing spots. They're not like hobbyist drones where you can just like bring them back down to your yard like super easily.
Right.
But they haven't been able to find out where these drones are landing. So I was just interested in that because either people somehow are landing these commercial drones in their backyards, which as someone who knows nothing about drones, I still don't see why that's not possible. Like even big drones aren't that big, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you have a decent sized backyard, I don't see why you wouldn't be able to land your drone there or land even a larger drone there. Yeah. But I thought that was interesting that they're having trouble finding out where these drones are coming from, if they are these like commercial registered drones.
And I think the problem sometimes is that the government's really bad at communicating. Where the government may say, we don't know where they're landing, but that doesn't mean that they're not capable of finding out where they're landing. It's just that like they're very precise in their wording. We don't know where they're landing right now. That doesn't mean that it's completely inconspicuous. It doesn't mean that it's clandestine or something like that. It's just that literally, hey, there were some odd reports in the sky and we don't know where they came from, which is very different than being like, oh my God, we're being invaded by China or Russia or something like that. But the government is notoriously bad about using this sort of cagey is not quite the right word, but like exact and precise language. Mm-hmm.
Well, lawyers write their language,
so
exactly. That they can't be they can't be sued or have something go awry later. I mean, it's like when that submersible exploded. Mm-hmm. They acknowledged that there was an explosion, or that they had heard something that was probably indicative of an explosion. I think that's literally, I'm paraphrasing, but what they said. And of course, if there was an explosion, or very likely an explosion, there's no use looking for anyone.
Right.
We all know what happened. They all died.
Yes.
But like they wouldn't say it for like a week or more until they found evidence of the exploded submersible. So I feel like this is another case of, or it could be another case of that, where they're using very precise language and they're not going to acknowledge anything until they have like 100% evidence of something.
Right.
Yeah, and I think here the stakes are probably a bit higher because this is an isolated incident under the sea, and this is like potentially, very detrimental to our airspace, to our safety. So they got to be careful.
And we never want it to look like we are unprepared or vulnerable, right? And this is something that I believe Lou Elizondo might have even talked about, is that the government doesn't want to give the impression that it's easy to get into our airspace. And that's one of the reasons that there's a lot of cover-up surrounding these things that are sighted there. Just because if something shows up and they don't know what it is, they don't want to be very public about that. So
yeah, and with like the presidential transition and everything, you're right. Like they don't want to seem vulnerable right now.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. Yeah. So I think it's really interesting because this sighting, the mass sighting in New Jersey, has been touted by a lot of people as being unprecedented. This has never happened before, this many people seeing lights in the sky like this. But it's actually not. So take the airship wave of 1897. We're talking about the 19th century here. It's one of the most fascinating instances of mass sighting in UFO history. Over the course of a year, about a year, from 1896 to 1897, thousands of people across the United States claimed to see cylindrical UFOs flying in the nighttime sky. Which is crazy, right? Because we all learned in school that the Wright brothers were the original airplane inventors, right? They did their first flight in Kitty Hawk in 1903.
But these don't look like airplanes.
These don't look like airplanes. These look different. They call them airships. Yeah.
Okay.
The thing is, right, flight, it's not a light switch. It's not like, oh, yesterday we didn't have a plane, today we have a plane. You know, there's development. There's a long period of development. So
not according to ancient aliens.
Oh, well, yeah.
No. Been flying around for a long time.
Exactly.
But you're talking decades of research, trial and error. We've had balloons. You know, we've had hot air balloons since I think the 1840s. You know, it's been ongoing.
Even before that, I think some of the first hot air balloons were in France in the 1700s.
Well, yeah. So they that's really old tech, right? And the public's not ignorant to this. This wasn't being developed in secret. In fact, Samuel Pierpont Langley tested the first airplane in 1896 and earned himself the title the first major aeronautical figure in the United States. And he was just one of a slew of inventors who were applying for patents for airships at the time. Now, I think what happens here is there's this time of technological advancement where we're about to break this barrier into flight. Kind of the same way that like cars were being developed, right? We were about to have vehicles on wheels traveling faster. We were about to have vehicles in the sky. And so when the Wright brothers did their flight at Kitty Hawk, the public consensus was more, okay, somebody was going to do it. Like it was definitely going to happen. We didn't know who it was, but it was bound to happen one of these days.
Like Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. Sure.
An inevitability.
Yeah, so you have this population that's primed to believe that aerial vehicles are feasible, right? So all of a sudden your papers start reporting flying machines, people believe them. And then they start going out and looking in the sky for flying machines. Now, most of these sightings happened at night, much like the New Jersey drones that we're seeing now. And witnesses would see lights either traveling across the sky or just hovering in place. And the ones who saw the crafts actually tended to describe a cigar-shaped object with either wings or propellers. The most famous illustration of this is from the San Francisco Call, and it shows a flying saucer-shaped object with 4 propellers mounted kind of along the bottom of it, and a set of lights that are shining downward. Some of them even had anchors, because that's what we thought technology was at the time, right?
Yeah, like how else are you going to land the plane, right?
Yeah.
You need an anchor.
Yeah, you need an anchor to land the plane. You need propellers to send it through the air, you know? Like
It's very sea-like. It's very ocean-like.
I was going to say.
They called them airships, right?
Yeah.
Airships, not airplanes.
What's interesting to me is that the whole idea of a flying saucer was back then. Like, they had something that looked like a flying plate. Or 2 plates put together.
Well,
before that Roswell incident.
Well, that came from Kenneth Arnold in 1947. He was the one that said 2 dinner plates, one on top of the other. This is more of a like big cigar-shaped balloon.
Oh, okay. Because I thought saucer. Okay.
Did they have blimps yet in the late 1800s? Because what you're describing to me sounds like a blimp. And I'm thinking, like, if there's balloons already, that would be potentially what someone could be seeing. Why there were so many of them is unclear to me, but...
The original blimps were developed in the mid-1800s. So, yes, they had blimps. Blimps were known technology at the time. Yeah.
And
so,
you're saying these had lights on them.
People saw lights. I'm not saying they had lights on them. I'm saying people saw the lights of airships.
I'm so curious because I, of course, am immediately like, what could this be? What could they have been looking at? And one of the things that people mistake as UFOs are stars.
Yeah.
And other astronomical phenomena, comets, falling meteors, shooting stars, that kind of thing. But like, I feel like in the late 1800s, people were way more familiar with the stars than we are today. Like, they just knew more about them. But maybe I am editorializing because I just assume. But really, it was like it would be today. Like, some people knew about the stars, but most people didn't really look at the stars very often and were maybe more familiar with them in that they could see more of them and they, I don't know, looked at them more often, but they weren't actually familiar with like the different constellations or anything like that. So maybe they were just as susceptible to being like, oh, whoa, look at that really bright light that's hovering. And it's like, nope, that's just Venus or, you know, whatever it happened to be showing that night.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much spot on there. You know, just because we are familiar with it now doesn't mean that they were any more familiar with it then, that people were doing any more stargazing then. There's an interesting phenomena that happens too when you stare at a bright light. Your eye tends to make very minuscule movements, and those movements make a distant bright light look like it is moving. And so it can be really hard to judge whether an object is stationary or not. It's one of the reasons that stars twinkle. So that's called the autokinetic effect. It's a really kind of fascinating thing that you have to take into account whenever people start reporting things like this, these lights in the sky that are quote unquote moving. So
with that and the fact that we don't have a basis for size, like if something's up in the sky, how do we know how big something is?
Especially at night.
There's a lot of confusion. And also, like, you can take the early 19th century issue with this too. It's like people are in a high emotional state probably. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're scared. Maybe they're in wonder. I don't know. Like we could be scared. Like looking up at these drones, we don't know what they are. We could be scared. We could be putting emotions behind it, and when you do that, I think you tend to really exaggerate what you're seeing, you know.
For sure. Also, it helped that there was a guy who actually built one. So there was this inventor named E.J. Pennington who he ultimately would go on to actually work on motorcycles, and he came up with the term motorcycle, in fact.
Oh, cool.
But he was in development of a cigar-shaped airship with propellers that he claimed would hold 50 passengers and travel at 200 miles an hour. He was ultimately unsuccessful, but he did build a prototype that was 30 feet, and it was like a propeller-powered balloon, which he flew at the World's Fair in Chicago. And that was later seen in Indiana, and they believe that was responsible for at least two of the sightings, the initial reports, I should say, two of the initial reports of these airships. And then, you know, you're talking America, you have a population that's like teetering on the brink of this technological boom. The skies are the next barrier to break through. Something's going to fly. Somebody's going to build a flying machine very soon. And that proverbial ball starts rolling. And more people, after reading the reports of Pennington's airship, started looking up in the sky and saying, oh, that's interesting. I see a light here. Oh, it seems like that light's moving a little bit. And then it gets reported. And the newspapers love this shit, right? Because this is a fascinating thing to start reporting on. And newspapers at the time were also notoriously bad about, you know, fact checking stuff like that. So, and then
they were less concerned with fact checking.
Yes, very much. And then it just keeps getting reported, and all of a sudden you have a whole bunch of people who are amateur stargazers looking up at the sky trying to figure out what's going on. There's a great skeptical writer, his name's Robert Bartholomew, who wrote an article about this, and he explained it in such a way that's really fascinating. Within highly ambiguous situations, such as people scanning the nighttime skies for an imaginary airship, inference can perform the function of perception by filling in the missing information in instances where perception is either inefficient or inadequate. Accordingly, individuals with an airship mindset perceived airships. And he even goes on to talk about a similar instance in 1978 when people saw there were just a bunch of regular old planes flying in the sky that people were positive were flying saucer shaped. And he said 90% of the witnesses described not what was perceptually available, but rather that they could see a disc shape form rotating with fixed lights. Many of these people imagine that they could see a dome on top, and when pressed will swear that they can make out the outline with confidence. So even though they were planes, two wings like regular old planes, people believed, over 300 people reported that they were flying saucers.
So the other night, my partner and I were driving home and saw a plane. We knew it was a plane because we were near a major airport. And we made a joke. Oh, look, a drone, right?
Yeah.
But I noted when I looked at the plane, one, planes are very small, look very small in the sky, even when they're coming in for landing. Like this plane was coming down for landing. So it was more at a height that you would think of in human terms, or because we can't judge the distance, that you would think of as closer to you than way high up in the sky. But in the nighttime sky, I was driving, so I was moving, the plane was moving. I would say that it looked like a flying saucer because the way the lights around it were reflecting off of it, it looked like I could kind of see that there was a dome at the top. I could see, now that you told me about this eye sensory thing, that you could perceive the lights as moving, even though they're not, because they're blinking and they are moving through space because the plane is moving, but you could potentially see them as spinning because your eye is doing something to like adjust for all of the movement and the lights blinking. Wow. It was an interesting thought I had because I made a joke, but in making the joke, I was looking at it and thinking, oh, if you didn't know what you were looking at, or you had the mindset, as this person said, that you were looking for a drone or a flying saucer, you could see a plane as that, I think, like pretty easily, because they look weird at night when you can't really tell what it is.
Absolutely.
That's so fascinating. Yeah. We really do like find what we're looking for. And Katie wasn't even really looking for it.
Right.
You knew it was a plane, and you still saw what looked like a drone or an alien spaceship. Who knows? That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the final piece that is very fascinating to me about this whole news story is just how many drones are in our sky. So we talked about this a little bit off air, so I won't ask you the question, but commercial drones, right? They're widely used for all kinds of applications. We got infrastructure, so they're going and they're inspecting like solar panels and lines and that kind of stuff, maybe doing basic maintenance on these things. They use them for agricultural field management, surveying, search and rescue. And then on top of that, you have, drones flying for photographic reasons like the news or recreational drones and things like that. So the FAA has 1 million registered drones in the United States. 1 million, right? Which breaks down into like half commercial and little less than half is recreational. And then those get divided into two additional categories. Drones that are less than 55 pounds or drones that are more than 55 pounds. And some of these 55-pound drones, like, they're big too. You know, they can be the size of a couch. Yeah.
Wow.
We're bad at judging distance in the sky, especially when there's nothing to compare it to, right? And so you see something like that up there, it might be closer to you than you realize. It's easy to see how somebody might misconstrue that. You hear a lot of reporting about how they're the size of like an SUV or something like that, but they may not be, right?
That's wild that there's so many. Sorry, keep going. But I just think that's a really wild stat to me.
Yeah, and that's what's registered. So that's crazy.
That's what's registered, right? So on top of that, you have to assume that there are unregistered military drones that would not be in the regular database as well, right? Now, of those 1 million drones, around 8,000 are in flight at any given time. Generally speaking, right? Which doesn't sound like
a lot. Yeah.
Until you break that down. So if we were just to divide that in 50 across the 50 United States, that'd be about 160 drones per state. Not that many, right? Except New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, the Philadelphia area, that's about 13% of the United States population. So you have to actually divide it that way, which means that 13% of the drones that are flying at any given time is about 1,000 drones in the air. So that's 1,000 drones just in this little tri-state area at any given time. You think about this, right? You're outside looking up at the sky in New Jersey. There's 1,000 drones up there. And then on top of that, there's about 1,200 flights into and out of JFK every day. Then there's also LaGuardia Airport, Newark Airport, and Philadelphia International Airport, all the smaller airports.
The Air Force bases.
Yep. And you also, all of the flight paths further south to BWI, to Dulles, to Reagan, those all go over New Jersey and New York. So,
right.
Yeah.
So all that's to say, there are thousands of vehicles flying in the sky on any given day in that area. So it's no wonder that people are seeing drones. There's all kinds of shit up there, right? You combine that with the rising interest that is driving more and more people to put their eyes on the skies, just like we saw in 1896, 1897, and you can see why the number of reports is skyrocketing. More people means more reporting, means you're going to get more false positives, means you're just going to have more incidents of unexplained things. Now, all of that said, it's possible that there's something strange going on out there. You know, it is. But before we deal with that, I think we have to systematically remove the reports that are caused by the noise and the data. Thousands of drones and planes flying, preconceptions of the viewers, and these enormous number of witnesses who are just out there looking for them.
Personally, I just think it's people flying their drones and everybody's starting to notice. Like there's just this, something triggered it and now everybody's looking.
Well, and how many people are also have their personal drones and are saying, yeah, I'm going to send that up in the sky and try to get close to one of these drones and take a look at what it looks like, you know?
And then maybe it looks like a big drone.
Right.
Because they're next to, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it wouldn't look like a normal drone, even if you knew what you were looking at from the ground, because there would be two of them and you might not be able to tell, and they would probably be flying like weirdly related to each other. I also just think, I mean, I have two thoughts here. One, it's possible that what triggered this was some sort of like military exercise or something that the U.S. government was doing that they don't want people to know about, and that other branches of the government don't even know about, right? I think, you know, they aren't always communicative with each other about, like, not everybody in the government has, like, top secret clearance, right? To know about something that they're working on. But so there's one thing, like there could have been a legit triggering thing that no one's going to tell you about. And then the second piece, that I was going to say, oh, in the Guardian article that we read about this, there was a very short sort of like one sentence little paragraph that they sort of sandwiched in between the rest of it, the article, about how that there are several, an unknown amount, the government won't say how many, videos of these drones that they can't identify as known flying objects, right? So planes or drones or stars or something like that. And so I think that that's interesting, right? And that could easily connect back to secret things that are going on, military experiments, new machines, new things that they're creating. And it could also be something else. So I think that was interesting that they sort of put that in there, but tried to skirt over it.
Yeah, that's like the most interesting thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've heard all kinds of explanations. Like I've heard that there are bases, like aquatic bases in the ocean that they're launching from and not. I've heard that they're interdimensional beings. And I've heard also some conspiracy theories that this is all a government test just to see how the population would respond to something like this.
But why? That makes no sense. Like, I'm sorry, but it just doesn't. The timing doesn't make sense. We're in a presidential transition. Why would you do this test now with one president leaving in like not 1 month, another president coming in, the new president's getting briefings, but he also notoriously can't keep his mouth shut about anything that he knows about. So like, I just think that there's no way that that's true. I think it comes back to this idea when people talk about like these false flag actions and things like that. I saw a really funny Instagram that was like, any project manager knows that false flag operations cannot possibly be true, because if you've ever tried to manage a project, you know how hard it is to get 10 people to do what they're supposed to do at the time that they're supposed to do it, let alone hundreds or thousands of people to do what they're supposed to do in a coordinated effort. And then nobody talks about it afterward. So perhaps, but I just like, that's the reason I don't buy that, because I just don't think the timing makes sense. Even if they had it planned, I feel like they would like push it back or something.
I recently had to get my new driver's license, and so I had to stand in line at the DMV for 2 hours to get my picture taken. And yeah, the whole time I was kind of like, so you're telling me that the government has some like great grand conspiracy that is hiding all of these alien things, but I have to wait for 2 hours to get my picture taken because they can't figure out how to make that move faster. Like,
but that's a psyop, though. They're trying to make you think that the government's dysfunctional and slow, but it's actually not.
Or the DMV itself is entirely a psyop, and they're trying to see how much stress they can put on people.
Yes.
Weren't in Men in Black, didn't some of the aliens work at the DMV?
Oh, yeah.
I think so, yeah.
I vaguely remember that. That's amazing.
So, they're just talking about real life.
Well, yeah, and didn't they grab, like, the Weekly World News and stuff? That was where the real newspaper reporting was all the supermarket tabloids? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that was such a great movie.
Yeah.
Well, this was a very festive news item, so I thought it would be a great way for us to close out this final recording of the season. So, archaeologists have found Santa Claus's tomb. Well, not exactly.
That's nice.
Yeah,
not
isn't that
exactly,
sweet?
but that's all to say that they've discovered the tomb of St. Nicholas, wonder worker and patron saint of toy makers. Now, he's also the patron saint of sailors, merchants, archers, repentant thieves, children, brewers, pawn makers, unmarried people, and students.
I always am curious. I just need a Catholic who knows a lot to inform me about how the saints come up with their, like, the people that they watch over, because the groupings never make sense. Like,
You're so right.
I don't know. Maybe it's like wandering people who are a little bit lost. I'm just thinking about, unmarried people,
but also
sailors,
but also brewers. Like how does that? I love, and those are back to back. It's like patron saint of children and brewers.
Yeah. There are other saints too that are patron saints of brewers. So there also are doubled up.
Oh.
Right, because there is a different patron saint who's the saint of brewers, right?
Yeah.
I think everybody wants to be the patron saint of brewers.
Yeah.
Or just all of these saints were walking into breweries and like, I'm the patron saint of brewers. I'm gonna give me some of your samples.
Yes.
Yeah. And or that, given that, when saints were really getting like nominated for this, I feel like there was a lot of corruption going on in the church.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They wanted beer.
They want to justify their habit, and I fully support this. I do think that Saint Nicholas earned part of it in the sense that he did give some gold bars to some young girls who would otherwise have had to go into prostitution. So he gave them a dowry so that they could go get married instead.
Yeah, I read that it was actually sacks. He would drop sacks of gold coins through their windows, and they would wake up and find these sacks of gold that allowed them to, I guess, not go into sex work, because that was what I suppose they had to do. But yeah.
I mean, the judgment, the weird judgment is weird. But I love that it does really give, like, credence to why we have the sack down the chimney, like, where that comes from.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know when it turned from chimney or from window to chimney. It seems like that makes zero sense, because Christmas is a cold time and everyone would have fires on in their chimneys. Maybe that's just part of the mystical magic, though. Like, obviously he can't come down the chimney, and therefore we're going to send him down the chimney because that makes it more magical.
It makes it more innocent, too, because if you have Santa crawling in through your window or your door, it's kind of creepy.
Or they were just
they
were worried that children would just let robbers into the house on Christmas Eve. Everyone would be breaking in. He's like, "Hey, get on Santa Claus."
Yeah,
I like that too. I also just think of the fact that in that vein, chimneys are sort of always open, right? Because you're letting the smoke out, but windows and doors are closed. And so you don't want people to open them and leave them open, or you wouldn't want to do that.
Oh, yeah, like have the kid leave the window open in December for Santa to crawl through? Yeah, sure.
Maybe, I think we're on to something. I think it was made to, like, prevent getting your house burgled every December 24th. Santa has to be on the roof and come through the chimney.
Yes.
Which is a difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
And magical.
Well, yeah, and you have the fire going, so Santa also has to be flame retardant.
Yes.
Yes.
But yeah, so due to his reputation of the secret gift giving, St. Nicholas was adopted as the mascot of the Christmas and Yule holidays. And that was combined with the British Father Christmas and the feasts and revelry that were associated with that figure, and the Dutch Sinterklaas and his generous gift giving. And these all were brought together and formed Santa Claus as we know him today. Christmas itself actually spawned out of the pagan festival Yule, because of course the Christians were co-opting a bunch of the pagan festivals and holy days. And in Yule, Odin would ride his sleigh for the wild hunt. And that's where Santa riding his sleigh comes from, and Santa with a great big white beard, that is Odin's great big beard.
It's a nice mishmash of things.
Yeah, it all just kind of gets glommed together into this new tradition.
I really like it. And I like how we keep adding things. I just found out the other day that Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was invented by a store as like an advertising coloring book for kids in like the 1940s or early 1950s. But everyone became so obsessed with it immediately that then, they made the song and the movie and everything else. But Rudolph is really new, actually, in terms of a Christmas tradition. Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that. I just kind of figured the song came first, actually. It's interesting that it was like merchandising first and then the song off the merchandising.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was literally a coloring book that a department store, I forget which one, they would send out a coloring book to all of the kids, like on their registry. You know, department stores used to have registries of people that got their magazine, and they would send out coloring books at Christmas for children. And one year they would use like third-party coloring book. And one year they decided they wanted to make their own. So one of their copywriters wrote Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer as like a poem/coloring book that they put out, and it was really popular. And so they put out the coloring book again, like several years in a row, and it just like took off. And the song came after. Actually, the copywriters, I think his brother-in-law wrote Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the song.
Oh.
And nobody wanted to record it. And Gene Autry finally got it, and he didn't want to record it, but I think like his wife convinced him to or something. And then of course it became this like massive hit. But anyway,
God.
That's hilarious.
New Christmas things you find out every time. But to the point about Santa Claus being just a mishmash of all these different traditions, I think that's what Christmas is. You just keep glomming on.
Yeah. Yeah, you make it your own. I like that. You know?
I love that.
You have like the traditions that you came up with, and then you add your own stuff onto it, and yeah, you make the holiday into your own. My little Christmas factoid is that everybody believes that Santa Claus wears red because of the Coca-Cola ads from the 1930s, but that's actually not true. Santa was depicted as wearing the like red fur-lined suit as far back as 1901 or 1902 in Puck magazine. So
that's really cool.
Oh, wow. What does he wear in these other traditions that they were pulling from? Do we know like what St. Nicholas's robes, like how was St. Nicholas portrayed, or how was Odin portrayed? Like what did Odin wear? Was he just I have no idea.
Well,
do we know?
I know that Sinterklaas wore red, and then he had the kind of like peaked hat that you see the Pope wear, or like Eastern Orthodox priests wear. Mm-hmm. Father Christmas, I believe, just wore fur. I mean, now of
just
course,
like animal furs.
Yeah, now of course he's in red all the time, but I'm pretty sure Father Christmas was in like animal fur. Just a warm thing, because he was going from house to house and participating in this like gift-giving revelry thing. I don't know what Odin wore for the Wild Hunt.
Probably fur again.
Probably
that
fur,
would make sense.
Yeah, it would make sense.
If you ever go to Philadelphia to the Bellevue Hotel, I don't know if they're still doing it, but for many years they would put all the different Santas from different cultures out in the lobby. So you could go through and they labeled them so you could see what all the Santas were depicted as in different countries. And it was always such a cool thing.
We're
It's
really
very popular.
falling off now.
I know, sorry.
Okay. Back to the tomb of St. Nicholas.
Yes.
Tell us about it.
St. Nicholas. Yes, there was a recent excavation at the St. Nicholas Church in Mira, Turkey, which has uncovered what appears to be the tomb of St. Nicholas himself. It was a limestone sarcophagus that was found buried about 5 feet under the foundation. And there's still no word if 8 reindeer-sized coffins have been found, but we'll just have to wait and see.
So he wasn't buried like an Egyptian king. Yeah. He has his reindeer. He's got Mrs. Claus next to him. He's got his elves all lined up, ready to go for the afterlife.
It's, kind of horrifying, actually.
I mean, you're telling me right here that Santa is dead, which is very hard for me to understand, because Santa is supposed to bring me presents this year. So I'm not sure I can accept this.
St. Nicholas was actually buried underneath the bishop of the church. The bishop of the church was buried on top of him. So he was not as important as the bishop, I guess. Or they just had a hole already and they were like, we'll put somebody else in there.
Honestly, that sounds more likely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, we got one. We'll just bury him. So, yeah, I mean, that's our news. That's our roundup.
Cool.
For this year.
We did it.
I love it. Woohoo.
Well done, everyone. Katie, thank you so much for joining us for this.
Yeah, thank you, Katie.
Thank you for having me. It was so much fun.
Yeah,
this was a really good time.
This is a lot of fun. Yeah. And let's see, EJ. So after this, we just finished up our Highgate Vampire series, and then we will be moving to something else really cool, a lot of fun. Definitely going to be a little monstrous for sure.
How exciting.
Pretty cool. And yeah, for 2025, we got a lot of really awesome things planned, so stick around. Thank you so much to all of our listeners. Thank you so much to all of our supporters for contributing throughout this year. We really appreciate your support and everything that you're able to bring to the podcast and everything that you're able to allow us to do. So thank you very much.
Couldn't do it without y'all, so thank you.
Yeah. All right. Any words of wisdom to close out 2024?
I don't know.
Keep looking at the skies.
There you go.
Keep looking at the skies.
Let's see what's up there.
Yeah, let's see what's up there. Have a amazing new year. Talk to you soon. Be safe out there.
Thank you.
Bye. Happy New Year.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Slaying Monsters, the Paranormal History Podcast. If you like the podcast, there's a couple ways to show your support. You can tell your friends, you can leave us a rating and review on your podcast platform, or you can head over to slayingmonsterspodcast.com and click on the Support Us button to leave a donation. For questions, suggestions, and other feedback, reach out to us, slayingmonsterspodcast@gmail.com, and stay up to date by following us on Instagram @slayingmonsterspodcast. Your support helps us grow, and we are truly grateful to have our listeners and community.